Hi guys, so this is video number 3 I think in the sort of running technique DIY running technique screen series, and today we're going to be talking about how to reduce impact. So say if you go back a couple of episodes and you've done the DIY technique analysis and you've determined that your impact is high, which means that you're landing very hard on the ground, and we know that that may be a correlation with injury risks, so we're thinking we want to try and reduce our impact. Now, this is a technique error that I find responds best to cueing, which is to say it's not so much something we work on with drills, ideally, although there is a way to do that, and we're going to talk about that. It's something you more work on with just a running cue. So a technique cue is when you either a coach or a physio, or you just read it and decide to do it yourself. You determine a cue that you think is going to help you run in a better way. Now, the thing with cueing is that there's lots of different cues. Some work better than others. Some work for a very small amount of people and some work for lots of people. So I tend to go with the ones that work for lots of people and start at the top of the list, the ones that are really likely to work, and then sort of work my way down, and I might have 6 or 7 in my mind that I'll be trying with a client to try and adjust their technique. But because this is just going out as a video / audio, I'm gonna go more start at the top of the list, try a couple. If they aren't working, I wouldn't work your way down too much, because it may be that that is not the strategy that would be best for you, and you might be better going with the drill. So I'll talk about the drill at the end. So the first thing we need to do is get on a treadmill, ideally in a quiet room. If that can't be done, on a treadmill in the gym, but at a quiet time of day, so it's not too noisy, or a quiet part of the gym if they have a quieter part. And the reason being that we want to be able to hear how much noise we're making. So if we reduce our impact, we should get quieter, and that's actually going to be the first cue. So you get on the treadmill, you run at your regular easy run pace. It's best to try and work on your technique at a slow pace, I've found, because if you can do it at a slow pace, you'll do it easier or easily at a medium and hard pace. So I usually do running technique stuff either at race pace or easy pace, because they're the time we spend most of our time in those zones as sort of more distance athletes. Sorry, Socks is whimpering about something. Socks is my dog, for anybody who doesn't know, and he's very upset about something outside at the minute. So yeah, maybe I'll edit this out. Anyway, the first cue that we're going to look at is running quietly, which sounds obvious, but it works most of the time. I'd say this is the most successful cue I've used with people when we're trying to reduce impact, is just thinking about running quietly. So you're running along on the treadmill, you pick your pace, and then you just think, okay, now I'm going to run quietly. Or sometimes I phrase it as make less noise. It depends what resonates. Now, if it goes well, you'll notice that you just start making less noise. What you want to do though is pay attention to your effort level before cue and after cue. You can rate it on a 1 to 10 scale. I've talked about that in previous episodes. So if your effort level is a 4 out of 10 without the cue, it wants to remain 4 out of 10 with the cue at the same speed. So you don't want to adjust the speed on the treadmill. I will say at this point that it's not a good idea to try and work on impact outside. It doesn't tend to work. You need to do it on a treadmill, in my experience, because you can't hear the impact outside. And then, so if that works well, then that's going to be your cue, and we'll talk about integration in a second. If that doesn't work well and you find that your effort level goes up, or you just don't get any quieter, or it just feels super difficult and it's hard to concentrate, it's hard to engage in your run because you're so focused on this drill. Then another one to think about is running on eggshells. Running on eggshells works less often, but it still works sometimes. And I've had a couple of people that one really worked super well. That being said, I've had far more where I tried that one, and what you see is people do this kind of creepy, they take sort of big steps and land on their tiptoes, almost like it's sort of like in the in children's movies where the bad guy is like trying to sneak up. Like that's what people do sometimes with this cue. I haven't actually tried doing this myself. I might do the same thing, but yeah, I'd be careful with this one and just watch your effort level and just look for, is this feeling just weird and really quite difficult? Now it's okay if you're changing your running technique, it's always going to feel a little bit weird. And if it felt comfortable and natural, it's probably too small a change to actually be a significant change. It's probably just so similar to how you normally run, and because running is such a habitual activity and we do it in such large volumes, when we change it even a bit, then it tends to feel very strange. So don't worry too much if it feels strange, but it doesn't want to feel stupid. You know, if you do the running on eggshells thing and you just feel like this just doesn't feel normal, right? This feels kind of ridiculous, then you might be doing that creepy thing. And of course you can always film yourself from the side and see how it looks. Socks is on the move again. I guess I'm taking him for a walk in a second. What is it, buddy? You know I'm gonna have to edit this out now. I might not edit this out. There's probably nothing there. He does this all the time. So they're the two cues I would look at, and just watch out for, do they work? Do they increase your effort level? And do they make you run in a kind of ridiculous way? And if they're not working well, then don't use them. If they are working well, then what you're going to do is think about that cue and run with that new technique for 1 minute out of every 5 on every run, or at least every easy run. And then if you do that for a couple of weeks and everything feels okay, no pains or new niggles cropping up, you can increase to 2 minutes out of every 5. Do that for a couple of weeks, increase to 3 minutes out of every 5. And just make sure you leave that 2-3 weeks to adapt and get used to it before you add more minutes. I've seen people, including myself, run into trouble by changing their running technique and then just switching to 100% of their running in that new technique. And even though the new technique might be better, as we've discussed previously, it shifts the stress onto different tissues that aren't used to that stress, and that may cause issues. And then the last one is a drill. I don't use this one as much. I used to use it more. I still think it's a really good technique drill to do. It's just not as easy as the other two that we just mentioned, the cues. So usually the cues work, and if they don't, then I do try this. And basically what I do is just get people to run in their bare feet. So let's say we're at the clinic and I've got someone on a treadmill and I try those two cues, and let's say I go down the list, I try a few more, and the impact is just as bad. But we really are convinced that we need to reduce that impact. Then we take the shoes and socks off, and sometimes what you see is people get really quiet after they that's it. You don't tell them to do anything. You just say, okay, can you take your shoes and socks off and get them to run? And if they get noticeably quieter, then that's a useful strategy that you can integrate as a drill to try and change your running technique. Now, I'd say 2 or 3 minutes the first time you run on a treadmill is cumulative, you know, so you might do 1 minute bare feet, and no, you won't do that. I'd say, yeah, 2 or 3 minutes is the most you want to do, maybe even 1. And blisters is the main reason. It just kind of hurts the skin in your feet. The skin and fascia and stuff of your feet, they're not used to running barefoot. We almost never do it, or at least most people. There are some people who do it, but it's not super common, and it's not as trendy as it used to be. So I would say limit it to 1 minute. And then the way I have used this in the past, and there's other ways to do it, you can integrate this drill any way you want. One way I used to do it was, I still do, I tell people they got a barefoot day. So let's say it's going to be like Sunday, and you might use a treadmill, you might go outside depending on the weather. You don't have to seek out, you know, grass or anything. You can run on the pavement. It just avoid pebbles and stuff. Like, that's the only thing that, not pebbles, what do they call it? Sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but you know, the little rocks. Gravel. You can run on the pavement in your bare feet just fine, especially for a few minutes, so that's not a problem. And you can definitely do it on the treadmill, but limit it to 1 or 2 minutes to start with. And then just after a couple of weeks, sorry, I usually add actually 1 minute per week. So if you're going to do that on the Sunday, right? So you take your shoes off, you do your first minute, you have your shoes just kind of waiting there for you. You've finished your minute, you come back to your shoes, you put them on, you go for your, I don't know, your 20K run or whatever you're going to do. If that goes well the first week, you just add another minute the second week. So you do 2 minutes at the start of your run, then 3 minutes the week following, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then you just build it up. And you can go as high as, like, I've had people go up to like a half-hour run in bare feet, and then they do the half hour, they sort of circle back to their house, they put their shoes on and they continue. Just be careful where you put your feet, because you can cut your feet, but if you find that super helpful, and it's a way of running that really, so it's a drill that really helps you improve your impact, and you notice that the next sets, let's say you do it for 5 weeks, right? So, and then you redo your sort of DIY screen. So you run on the treadmill somewhere quiet, and you're like, oh man, I'm quite a bit quieter now. I've really reduced my impact. And you're like, well, great, that's working quite well for me. Then you might want to consider getting some minimalist shoes. And when I say minimalist, there's a good website called runningclinic.ca. And they have a minimalist index, which is a really cool like way of categorizing shoes. And basically it's like 0% minimalist would be like a Hoka, right? So it's really supportive. And it's not supportive, actually. It's very cushioned and not very flexible. And then they've got a way of quantifying all the way to the other end, where 100% minimalist would be like those Vibram 5 fingers or something like that. And then like 90% would be some of those Vivo barefoots. And then 80% might be, I don't know, I'm blanking, but or the Merrell have some trail shoes that are very minimalist. And then it just kind of goes down somewhere. You'd get the Ultra, right? Because they don't have support, and they're not very constrictive, but and they don't have any drop, but they do have some cushioning. And then you go further down, you'll get to sort of more traditional running shoes like the Kianos or something like that. So anyway, I'm babbling on about running shoes a little bit. This isn't what this video was supposed to be about. But you can use that website, so runningclinic.ca, and you want something over 80%, more like 90% minimalist. And remember, you're just using these as a training drill, right? They're not going to be your running shoe for all the time. And I, most of the time, don't advocate for switching to minimalist shoes for most things. I know the guys at the Running Clinic do. It's not my personal recommendation. It's not something I do often, although I have done with people with problems that responded well to it, and their problems were, they call it recalcitrant. It means that they just weren't going away. So they'd had the problem, let's say it was a plantar fasciitis or something like that, 2 or 3 years, and then we switched to a minimalist shoe and it just feels like tons better. It's like, okay, well, we're going to train you to be able to run in those for all of your running, or most of it. But the idea with the barefoot running drill is not to switch to minimalist shoes. It's just to incorporate the style or the technique that you adopted in bare feet into your regular running style, which you can use whatever shoes are working out for you. I hope that makes sense. Now, if the cues didn't work and running in bare feet, so you take your day one, right? You're doing your running technique screen. You're like, I am making too much noise. I take my socks and shoes off, and I'm still making too much noise. So I don't know, 50% of people, actually I think there's some research on this, I can't remember the statistic, but there's a certain percentage of people, when you take the shoes and socks off, they just run in the exact same way, and the rest change in some way. And typically the changes will be increased cadence and reduced impact. So reduced impact is the one we're going for here. Now, but you might be one of those people who doesn't change the way you land. So then it's tricky. How do you reduce impact when the cues haven't worked and the running in bare feet hasn't worked? Usually what I do is slow the treadmill right down to a sort of comically slow pace and try and get the person to run quietly as slowly as they possibly can. I haven't had to do that very much. Usually one of the first 3 things works, but that the first 2 things work, but that is another option, and then you gradually speed it up without adding more impact. Okay, that's impact. any questions, just let me know in the comments, and I'm not sure what the next episode will be about. I will review my questions, and I will do some prep. Now, if you have any questions for me, if you just email them to mboydphysio@gmail.com, that's mboydphysio@gmail.com, because these videos and audio will be better if I get good questions. So I've had some really good questions so far, and that's why I'm making these. So this one, who was it? My apologies. Celia, thank you. This was about running technique, and I sparked a whole little series that I decided to do on running technique. So hopefully you guys find this helpful, and if you do, and if you have your own questions about running injuries, running technique, rehabilitation, running training, I am going to stick to running for the most part for the time being, just because I've only been doing triathlon like 18 months or something, so I'm really learning at the minute, and I'm going to make some episodes where I talk about what I'm learning with regards to triathlon, and triathlon injuries and stuff I can certainly talk about because the principles are similar, but you know, I'm not going to make too much about like this is how you do a bike fit, for example, because I don't know how to do a bike fit, right? So it's like the running stuff is going to be more, I'm talking about stuff I understand and can speak with some expertise on, and triathlon stuff I'm going to take a different tact with it, because I do want to talk about it because it's fun, but I'm going to start with the running stuff because I'm much more comfortable with that. So if you have running questions, let's hear them. If you have triathlon questions, I still want to hear them, but I might not get to them for a while. Okay, I'm babbling on now. I'm going to go because Socks wants his walk. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you next time.